So Wassim Nassr, today in court, Salah Abdeslam did speak. He doesn't answer relevant questions, but he's made some statements. He says Muslims are judged and treated in the worst of ways, mercilessly. There's no presumption of innocence. He made comments about Allah. What do we make of his attitude until now and today in court?
Actually, he didn't say anything, as you said, relevant to his case or to what happened in Forest, the shooting in Forest. He is just confirming, in a way, that he is still committed to this ideology, and that he doesn't consider in any way or another the judicial system in Belgium, because he said also that he only trusts the justice of God, of Allah, as he said. So it shows us that despite all this time that he spent in jail, alone in a cell, he is still committed, he is still convinced about his deeds and this ideology, which is in somehow in a clear contradiction with what was said about him just after the attacks of the 13th of November, because we know that an explosive vest was found in Montreuil, his vest, and many analysts said at the time that he didn't dare to go to the end and to activate this explosive vest, that he was a coward, and that he flew France, and that he was wanted by the police, but also by his fellow jihadis. And so we know today, after what was found in one of the computers in Belgium, that he wrote a letter as a will, and that he says that in this will that his vest didn't work. And after all these statements today, we are sure today that he is still committed, he is still convinced.
So he is determinedly resolute in what he sees as a spiritual reason for what he's done. He's been kept, as you say, in solitary confinement in prison. Different prisons in different countries opt for different systems. Sometimes Islamist, jihadist prisoners are put together. Sometimes they're kept in solitary confinement. What works, what doesn't work? There's a big problem with radicalisation in prisons. And very recently in France, we had prison officers being attacked by prisoners who appeared to be shouting jihadist slogans. They were committing jihadi acts in prison, it appears.
Yes, it appears, and it is true, because the Islamic State called for those prisoners to attack the people in charge in prison, either they are civil or military or judicial authorities, because for them they represent the state. So the state that they are against in each and every state in the West or elsewhere in the world, and there is no clear magic solution. Nobody has found yet the solution, because when they are put together, they form very dogmatic cells, and they prepare the future of the jihad in jail. For instance, and for example, all the leaders of the Islamic State grouped and knew each other in American jails in Iraq, in Abu Ghraib or in Buka prisons. And some analysts today in the United States, they even say that if those prisons didn't exist, the Islamic State wouldn't exist too. So it's a big problem today. So putting them together, we have this kind of danger. It was the case, for example, in other countries like Lebanon. It was the case also in Egypt. For example, Ayman Zawahiri, the head of Al-Qaeda, spent some years in jail also in Egypt. And we should know that for jihadi groups and their dogma or in their ideology, prison is just a period where they think that they are resourcing, they are thinking, and they are making a new relation. As for criminal organization, for example, a regular or small criminal, when he enters prisons, he becomes someone else when he goes out. He has more connections, more relations, more acquaintances. So this could be the case. But on the other hand, by putting them all together, you kill any initiative of rehabilitation for some of them, because taking the way of jihad isn't a one-way course. Some people can go back from jihad. In France, for example, at least two of former Guantanamo prisoners, French citizens, who spent 2 years in Guantanamo, then 2 years in jail in France, today are most active in all the initiatives of de-radicalization, for example.
Let's talk about those initiatives. Firstly, what has been successful, many of these schemes are extremely expensive and take an awful long time and produce
no results.
Very, very small results. There is also the question of people returning from Syria. Some people agonize over particularly how women and children returning from Syria should be treated when they return to often European countries. Others don't agonize at all and have a very simple solution to it. How are different countries treating returning Syrian fighters? I'm thinking of outside Europe as well.
Yes, actually in Europe, the response is similar. Almost similar in all European countries. Today, they are all put in jail, and goes also for women. There was a period where women were considered as victims of the jihadi groups or ideology, but today they are considered as men. And so they're having very heavy jail sentences. And we shouldn't forget that in Europe we are in that each case is treated alone, and this is how it should go. There is no common treatment for everybody, because each person who chose to go into jihad, he chose it on the personal level first of all, and each person that decides to leave jihad decides also to leave jihad on the personal level.
So on a case-by-case basis.
Exactly.
But often with heavy sentences for women.
Often with heavy sentences. It's the case in European or Western countries as a whole, but in other countries, like in African countries or in Iraq and Syria, the states there have to find other solutions because the number are huge. And in those states, you have popular support for the jihadis, which isn't the case today in Europe. So the answers aren't the same. So this is why we see, for example, in Nigeria, there are pardons for Boko Haram jihadis, or even for Islamic State jihadis today, issued by the state, because they have to do so. And in other countries like Tunisia, the families aren't treated as harshly as they are treated, for example, in European judicial countries, because also the numbers are huge. The numbers are huge. And, for example, in Iraq or in Syria, some of the locals are being freed. For example, the locals of the Islamic State who were involved in the administration or on the civil administrative level, they are being freed, the non-combatant. Right. But for example, even a Western citizen, even if he was, for example, working in a hospital for the Islamic State, he's considered as a terrorist.
Right.
So there's a big difference between the
treatment. Terrorist suspect,
yes,
yeah.
For objective reasons. Yes. Because you cannot put, for example, 10% of the population in jail in Syria and Iraq. For the number, even if they are big here in Europe, they are still manageable.
Yes, right. Daesh then has been defeated militarily. Are we likely to see just something very similar under a different name mushrooming?
I can just remind you that the Islamic State is being defeated militarily for the third time at least. Because the Islamic State in Iraq, which was founded in 2006, has been declared defeated at least 2 times before this time. So there were a little more than 100 fighters in the desert of Anbar in the year 2009. They were kicked out of the cities, and it didn't prevent them from taking half of Syria and half of Iraq in 2014, 2015. Yes. So if you look at the objective reasons for the rise of such a group, you can see that today the objective reasons still exist, and they are even more complicated than in 2011, because today you have to look at the map of the region. You see that Sunni towns are completely destroyed, like Mosul, like Raqqa, and you have towns going from the frontier with Iraq, the Iranian frontier with Iraq, up to the frontier of Lebanon. We have big cities destroyed. Huge areas are totally destroyed, and millions of people are being gathered in camps in the desert. So whenever the military pressure will go down, Western military pressure, because that's the military pressure that works. It's the Western military pressure. Whenever it will go down, they will be back, knowing that this military effort costs millions and millions and millions. And if you look at Afghanistan, for example, the war in Afghanistan is ongoing since 2001, the Western involvement in the war. And today we have the Taliban, they are back in more than half of the provinces in Afghanistan. Today we have thousands of fighters for the Islamic State in Afghanistan. Why? Because when the military pressure went down, in order to fight them in Syria and Iraq, they were able to prosper in Afghanistan. And today, whenever the military pressure will go down in Syria and Iraq to fight them back in Afghanistan, which the Americans are doing today, they will go back. Because all the objective elements are still there. The military solution isn't a solution by itself. Otherwise, this long war that started in 2001 against terror would have ended.
Yeah. Are there other areas where Islamism and jihadism are on the rise? We're hearing that after the treatment of the Rohingya people, that has become an area where jihadists and Islamists are targeting people who might feel angry.
It could. It's not really the case yet. But Al-Qaeda issued a clear statement calling for jihad to help, between brackets, the Rohingya people. And we know that Southeast Asia today is a fertile territory for jihadi movements. We saw what happened in the Philippines. So the Islamic State today has a branch in the Philippines. And the battle for Marawi, which is a big town in the Philippines, lasted more than 6 months, which tells us that yes, it is possible, because somehow today jihad is the thing of the century. As other red revolutions, for example, were the things of the century in the 20th century. Today, jihad is the only revolutionary ideology on the market. So it's going to attract more and more and more people. And up to now, the answers aren't there yet.